Can't we agree that capitalism is an economic system? A system for the production and distribution of things we need and want?
I won't agree to that. Not until you say something about government, too. There has to be a legal basis for any economic system to operate.
Well, it's easy to see that you have different ideas of what capitalism is. Maybe we should talk about what it is not. It is not a system of strict governmental control and planning in which a dictator or board tells people what jobs they may hold and what goods they may produce.
And it's not a system of government ownership.
We should bear in mind that we don't have a capitalist system, and no capitalist system has ever survived. It would self-destruct in 5 minutes. So what we have is a kind of state capitalist system, with the state playing a substantial role in American history, a very substantial role in economic development, in production, and research, development, bailouts, lots of other devices to keep the private sector viable. So it's a kind of a state capitalist system, like others, but they vary a little on how they do it. So is there an alternative to this? Of course. For example, the alternative that was taken for granted by 19th century workers before it was sort of beaten out of people's heads by massive propaganda. They were expressing the common view of working people, namely that those who work in the mills should own them and run them. Yeah, that's very natural. And as I say, we've come close to that a number of times, terrifying to private owners. They also held that wage labor is basically no different from chattel slavery, except that it's temporary. And that was such a popular idea that it was a position of the Republican Party that Abraham Lincoln espoused it. And it makes sense. I mean, there's nothing holy about wage labor. You are renting yourself, which is not very different from being a slave, except that maybe it'll end sometime. Okay, so those are alternatives. Self-management, democratic control of institutions, whether they're communities or workplaces or any others, alliances among them, federal arrangements. These are all perfectly feasible alternatives. There's no economic or political theory that tells us there's anything wrong with them. They conflict with the structure of existing power systems, and therefore the educational and cultural system tries to drive them out of your minds and make them seem insane or crazy or unthinkable. But there's nothing unthinkable about them.
American libertarianism in its modern form was launched in 1946-47 as the Cold War started by an executive from the Chamber of Commerce the initial outfit that actually coined and created modern libertarianism is called the Foundation for Economic Education. It was essentially just a giant business lobby. It had basically the Fortune 500 companies were on the list of all the donors. The people who sat on the boards were all from DuPont, General Motors, and oil companies. And their goal was really to fight and roll back the New Deal.
Vice President Henry Wallace was asked by the New York Times to write an op-ed about fascism in America, and he wrote this. He said, "They claim to be super patriots, but they would destroy every liberty guaranteed by the Constitution. They demand free enterprise, but are the spokesman for monopoly and vested interest. Their final objective is to capture political power so that, using the power of the state and the power of the marketplace simultaneously, they may keep the common man in eternal subjection."
Private enterprise works just the way Milton Friedman says. You give the worst possible service at the highest possible profit. That's what it means to be in the business. If you try to be benevolent, you're out of the business because somebody undercuts you. So the nature of the system, insight goes way back to Adam Smith, is to be as mean and rotten as you can, to try to maximize profit and market share and give the worst possible service.
When one of the big networks does a story about libertarians or libertarianism, don't they say, this political philosophy that was invented as corporate PR in the 40s?
I mean, that's a great question. Why don't they ask all kinds of questions? Why didn't they ask, proper questions about the fake WMDs in Iraq? I mean, we could go on and on about this. They're not curious. The answers are depressing. It's a reminder of actually how corrupted our political system is, and how much propaganda, under the guise of PR, we're subjected to in this country.
Future Americans will have all the electricity they need. This means a better, more satisfying life for us all.
For over 100 years, GE has been a company powered by ideas.
Progress is our most important product. Now here's another General Electric first.
One of our nation's largest private companies is proudly built on American values and skill. Koch Industries started in the heartland and has expanded to nearly every state. Today, that means more than 60,000 American jobs. We're still branching out into new fields, but our vision has stayed the same: to provide innovations that help people improve their lives. Together, we are Koch. Find out more at kochcareers.com.
Celebrate liberty
and freedom.
And freedom, of course, we're talking about the Tea Parties going on across the country all day long. But
you could hang it from your mirror, too, like fuzzy dice.
And here are the remnants of the Teabag Tax Day protest against the Obama administration tax policies.
The Tea Party revolution.
There's probably one right by you.
We have a map to show you just how widespread these are. It comes from Newt Gingrich's organization. Bam! Fox News is out in front of this.
Americans are making their voices heard as they fight for their future. Neil is giving them a voice. Total, fair, and balanced network coverage. Live.
It's a movement that is sweeping the nation all across the country.
Partying 1773 style.
We're live on Taxed Enough Already, or Tea Party Day.
I want you to look at this very impressive collection of young Americans here.
Hundreds of these protests across the country, and may involve millions of people. Hopefully millions of people.
Now she's paying for the $800 billion Republican Democrat fascist stimulus package. When are we going to wake up and start fighting the fascism that seems to be permeating this country?
Pretty soon it'll be April 15th, and the people in your neighborhood are going to have to send in their income taxes. The way they're going to look at it, and the way they've been trained to look at it, is that there's some alien force, like maybe from Mars, which is stealing our hard-earned money from us, namely the government. Okay, well, that would be true in a totalitarian state. But if you had a democratic society, you'd look at it the other way around. You say, great, it's April 15th. We're all going to contribute to implement the plans that we jointly decided on for the benefit of all of us. But that idea is even more frightening than Social Security. It means that we would have a functioning democracy. And no center of concentrated power is ever going to want that, for perfectly obvious reasons. So yes, there's major efforts and pretty successful efforts to get people to fear the government as their enemy.
The Tea Party idea was first raised during this on-air rant by CNBC reporter Rick Santelli.
I'll tell you what, if you read our founding fathers, people like Benjamin Franklin and Jefferson, what we're doing in this country now is making them roll over in their grave. We're thinking of having a Chicago Tea Party in July. All you capitalists that want to show up to Lake Michigan, I'm going to start organizing.
Testifying to the grassroots nature of the uprising, the vast majority of Tea Partiers are middle-class Americans with little or no experience in political organising.
I'm just a mom that was tired of seeing what was going on in my country, and I decided to do something about it.
Well, on the surface, the Tea Party movement is a bipartisan uprising against government waste and corruption. Beneath this, other powerful forces were at work. In January 2010, a group of prominent leaders released the Declaration of Tea Party Independence. In it, they decreed that the movement's core purposes included a belief in a radical form of free market capitalism. The focus of my investigation was this initial first year of the Tea Party movement. In particular, what role had been played by two billionaire industrialists, brothers Charles and David Koch, who who for more than 3 decades have funded a propaganda war enrolling citizens in their quest to create a privatised America. Government has become a monster, crippling the economy and devouring personal liberties. This poster is from the 1980 Libertarian Party campaign, in which David Koch ran for vice president. The party's policy platform is an insight into just how radical the views of the free market movement really are. They sought the abolition of almost all regulatory agencies charged with protecting public health and safety, not to mention Social Security, the public school system, and virtually all taxes. But after spending over $2 million of their own money on the campaign and receiving just 1% of the vote, the Koch brothers changed course. In 1984, they founded a group called Citizens for a Sound Economy. The aim was to make it appear that grassroots citizens were advocating these radical ideas, and not a wealthy and powerful elite. In truth, as this leaked 1998 budget shows, the backing came not only from billionaire ideologues like the Kochs, but sizable donations from companies across a range of industries. In 2004, the group split in two, with the Kochs funding the newly formed Americans for Prosperity, or AFP. To find out more, I've come to AFP's annual convention. As representatives of the group's 800,000 members gathered, it was obvious how successful this campaign to get citizens to support the free market vision has been, much to the delight of Chairman David Koch.
5 years ago, my brother Charles and I provided the funds to start the Americans for Prosperity. And it's beyond my wildest dreams how AFP has grown into this enormous organization.
While Koch has distanced himself publicly from the Tea Party movement, the event indicated otherwise.
We helped organize huge tea parties all throughout the state.
We have led the largest tea party in the state.
The largest tax day tea party in the nation on April 15th.
Hey folks, we've held 29 tea parties.
We've organized dozens of tea parties.
Mr. Chairman, our grassroots efforts are engaged, they're energized, and they're ready to fight for their freedom.
And if you try to raise our taxes and trample on our liberties, we're either going to beat you or make your life miserable.
Importantly, AFP helped build the Tea Party movement from day one. Within hours of Rick Santelli making his famous Tea Party rant, an AFP staffer was able to offer him on national television 500,000 names to get the movement started.
Rick, I've got 500,000 people who signed our petition against the stimulus bill. I'm willing to email all of them and tell them to come out to your event.
Then there are the other groups born from the ashes of the old Citizens for a Sound Economy. While no longer financially connected to the Kochs, FreedomWorks runs a similar model of corporate-funded free market activism. From day one, they also worked on the ground to help small groups organise Tea Party events. But in order to understand how these groups might be manipulating Tea Partiers and their own supporters, the first issue was why the identity of donors was hidden behind the facade of being a grassroots citizens group. It was a question I posed to propaganda expert Mark Crispin Miller.
Propaganda is all the more credible for not seeming to be propaganda at all. It's very important. It has to seem to come from some unimpeachably neutral source or from the people themselves. Because we're talking about deceptive ways of getting around people's defenses, right? Of getting around their natural resistance to being told what to do by powerful forces. Well, in the political realm, we have the really insidious practice of fake grassroots agitation. We call it AstroTurf. The people who are chosen to represent the group are paid. They're hired precisely because they look convincingly of the people, you know. But it's not, if it weren't for the entities that are pumping money into them and that started them in the first place, they wouldn't exist.
Charles Koch is kind of an evil genius, for lack of a better word. I mean, he's the one in the late 60s and early 70s with another cretin, Murray Rothbard, kind of an interesting but absolutely cretinous libertarian, who took libertarianism, which really was the John Birch Society. It was just openly far-right reactionary. And what they did is they kind of created the modern libertarian movement, where they saw, wait a minute, the baby boomers, the hippies, they're also against government because they're against cops, they're against drug laws, they're against, you know, the CIA overthrowing governments and so on. And so we'll basically, you know, fuse our core program, which is an economic program, really to get government off corporations' backs and to get government off the rich's backs, and fuse it with sort of the youth's interest, which is getting government off their backs when it comes to like drug laws and the draft. Right. And that's kind of what created the modern movement. So Charles Koch, money and brains were very, very influential in creating the modern libertarian movement. It's not the other way around at all. They think they're pro-pot and that they're anti-war. But remember, you know, Ron Paul and Rand Paul, as far as I know, everything I've actually seen what they vote on, they're not for actually legalizing drugs. They're for devolving the power to the states. So if states want to oppress or repress or jail people, that's up to the states for smoking weed. It's only tyrannical if it's done by Washington, but it's absolute liberty if you're thrown in jail for smoking a joint in a state.
Yeah, democracy is very dangerous because that's mob rule. If you get 51%, then your rights become relative. 51% come and vote and say, well, we can do anything we want. How do you protect them?
So you think democracy is dangerous?
Well, yes, it's dangerous because 51% rules. That's how the minority gets cheated. You always have to, in a free society, you have to protect the minority. But why should the 51% said slavery? I mean, that's horrible. So no, to protect the minority, you cannot say that the majority can dictate rights.
A power scale is another important yardstick of despotism. It gauges the citizens' share in making the community's decisions. Communities which concentrate decision-making in a few hands rate low on a power scale and are moving towards despotism, like France under the Bourbon kings, one of whom said, "The state, I am the state."
And the founders are very, very clear on this. They said, we don't even want a democracy, we want a republic.
It has always been understood by, I would say even the mainstream of democratic theorists, that when the voice of the people is heard, you're in trouble. Because they're always going to make the wrong decisions. The stupid and ignorant masses, as they're called, are going to make the wrong decisions. So therefore, we have to have what Walter Lippmann, back in 1920 or so, called manufacture of consent. We have to ensure that actual decision-making, actual power is in the hands of what he called a specialized class, us smart guys, who are going to make the right decisions. And we've got to keep the general population marginalized because they're always going to make mistakes.
Marginalizing meaning?
Reduce them to apathy and obedience. Allow them to participate in the political system, but as consumers, not as true participants. That is, allow them a method for ratifying decisions that are made by others, but eliminate the methods by which they might first inform themselves, second, organize, and third, act.
What sort of community do you live in? Where would you place it on a democracy-despotism scale?